Hi, my name is Kevin Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me VE3JLN, James Linden. James is an active POTA participant. He's also on the development team with Parks on the Air, and those are the two significant reasons that I asked him to be with me today. James, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I don't usually go here or start here, but I'm curious what you do for a living that brought you to Ontario, Canada.
So, me being in Ontario, Canada, actually has nothing to do with what I do for a living. Uh, what I do for a living just doesn't get in the way. I am a computer geek. Currently, I'm a cloud implementation manager, which basically means I help people figure out how to move their applications and systems into the cloud. And so I'm a computer geek, and fortunately, that has allowed me a lot of flexibility. So marrying a Canadian was not a huge challenge because there's cloud jobs pretty much in every country in the world now that has major internet infrastructure.
So the reason I asked the question, I had an idea that you were in software for a full-time job. You're part of the volunteer development team with Parks on the Air. Anybody who's watched this show before knows that I have an incredible amount of respect for what Parks on the Air has done, but specifically what the development team has done. What I'm curious about is people like yourself that make a living spending most of your hours working within software, and then you're willing to flip the switch and continue to volunteer that same sort of technical ability. Tell me about that.
Yeah, it's my wife's actually asked me the same question sometimes, and I don't have a straight answer for either of you because it does seem counterintuitive. But what it comes down to it is I got into this because I enjoyed it. I've been writing code since I was a youngster. Came up through the web, being invented, and I'm old enough to remember pre-web days. So for me, it's just a way for me to expand my horizons. And quite frankly, at this point in my career, my job is a lot more management than hands-on. So this gets me more of the hands-on. And in this case, we happen to be using Python and Vue.js for the most of the website and the back end. And I'm not been a big fan of Python. Most of my career, I've managed to steer around it and learn everything else. But I've been around it enough that I knew enough to be able to jump in, and I'm using it to expand my horizons there. So while my day job might be highly technical, it's not hands-on all the time. So this gives me a chance to, actually write some code again, and not just for projects to amuse myself, but for something that can benefit other people. Um, and in the end, a couple hours here or there that I might be able to put in is a relatively small amount to help a project that has helped me because frankly, POTA gave me a renewed interest in ham radio. I've been a ham since I was 12 and not very active for most of that time. And here 30 years later, it's given me something to do, and I've met a lot of great people through POTA. So it's a way I can give back beyond just participating in the activity.
Well, that's a great answer, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate the time you put into Parks on the Air to make it good for people like myself. Let's work backwards. 12 years old, you got your ham radio license. Were your parents ham radio operators? What got you involved at 12?
Yeah, so my dad was in the Air Force before I was born. He was an avionics technician. The short version, it's more complicated than that. But when he was stationed overseas, he volunteered at the Mars station doing phone patches for servicemen. This is back in the 70s. He volunteered doing phone patches back to the U.S. so they could talk to their families. So he had an awareness of ham radio and RF communications in general, going way back. And in Morse code always kept him. The requirement for Morse code always kept him from getting his license. Um, so in the early 90s, when the U.S. Came out with the no-code tech, that was kind of the last excuse. So he went and got his, I want to say 1990 or early 91. He went and got his license, and then pretty quickly thereafter, I started studying because obviously I wanted to do everything my dad did. Um, and I was able to. I actually went to a ham fest and passed the novice portion of it, but didn't quite pass the tech part. So I had to go to the local library the next testing session a month or two later and take the tech section again. But I passed it. Um, and a lot of that's just hanging out with my dad and, having access to a radio. And yeah, it was mostly 2 meters. But back then, packet was really taking off. So we had some 2 meter packet interconnects. So I was able to be active in packet radio. And I was sending messages through relays all over the world. And as a 12, 13-year-old, that was awesome. And that was people were kind of like, people treated packet back then a lot like we kind of treat FT8 sometimes now, and that's not a real mode. Don't do QSL cards. It doesn't really count. But a lot of these people, I printed my own QSL cards on just heavy paper. And a lot of these people were gracious enough to send me QSL cards. I have, as a 12, 13, 14-year-old getting QSL cards from Lebanon and Turkey and Portugal. And it was a lot of fun. And I was also a stamp collector. So I would get the stamps and put those in my stamp collection. I'd have the QSL cards. I still have those QSL cards to date. It's not very many, maybe 20 or 30, but that really got me fired up. So yeah, it was my dad. And then actually a year later, my mom got hers as well. And then since then, brother and ex-sister-in-law had their calls for 10 years. Another brother just upgraded to extra like 2 months ago. So now I'm in a family of hams.
I'm actually envious that you still have those QSL cards. I got started when I was in high school with WB1 DED. Ended up being an advanced class. I was very involved with the local club, but all these years later, none of that survived. I don't know where it got left behind, but it's no longer with me. I did manage to carry around this TS830 that I got when I was 21 all these years. And of course, when I got back into the hobby a year ago, I had to get something different, but it's there and it's got a lot of nostalgic value. So you mentioned that you stopped participating in ham radio for a little while. What happened there? What got you away from the hobby?
Well, I graduated from high school. My childhood had some interesting quirks. We won't get into those, but basically, after high school, I had to kind of rewrite my life, and there just wasn't room for anything like that. And then when I was always interested, and it was always on my mind. But then when I did have some space, I went to a couple of club meetings where I was at the time, and I was really turned off by the particular group of people and some of the attitudes. And quite frankly, a lot of it was they found out I was at the time still a no-code tech, and there's a little bit of there's a lot of judgment about the no-code tech even 20 years later, right? So, or it wasn't even 20 years, it's 15 years later. So I don't know if it was that or just the nature of people in general, but I had a couple bad experiences with club people, not the hobby directly. And then I moved to Canada the first time and met some really great people by accident at the local club. We were in an electronics store and they were wearing jackets that had, the club name and their call signs on them. So I went over to introduce myself with my US call, and they said, "Oh, eyeball DX contact, that's super rare." And they invited me to the meetings and the coffees and, but then I went back to the States after a number of years, not having gotten my Canadian license. And when I moved back this last time, a year and a half ago, they finally took me and said, you're getting your Canadian license now. So it was kind of funny the way it happened, but basically I showed up to do a POTA activation with a couple of the locals, and they said, "No POTA activation for a year. Here's a 100-question test. Have fun." So they activated while I got to take my test.
So you could have operated as a stroke VE3. You chose to get your Canadian license. Why did you choose to go ahead and get that Canadian license?
Well, I did operate as a stroke VE3 for a number of months. It's a tongue twister. It confuses a lot of people when they're logging. I was I was having to repeat my call a lot of times, and a lot of people, "How do I log you?" And of course some people would log stroke VE3 and some people would not. And so part to parts weren't matching in the POTA system. And not to mention, since I moved there and I would plan to be there a while, I figured, I'm living here now. So why not get the local call sign. Originally, when I lived there, it was actually a series of visits. I wasn't there full time, so it made less sense to me to get a call. But now I moved there permanently. Um, it just made more sense, and it's easier. The trick now is that when I come back to the States like I am now, sometimes I still start saying Victor Echo 3 on the radio. Oh, nope, wrong call sign.
Well, I can relate to the confusing part because I operated, it was actually my first activation trip. I went up to Quoddy Head, Maine, which is the easternmost point, and then crossed over into Campobello and operated as a stroke VE9. And there were a lot of questions about, what I was actually saying. There was even a debate with somebody about whether it was backstroke or slash and if I was saying it properly. And again, as a new ham, it made it very intimidating for me. Am I getting this right at all? Why can't people understand it? So take me back to getting a Canadian license. So what is the process like there? Is it very similar to the US?
Yeah, it's volunteer examiners. The interesting is that instead of having do we still have a novice test in the U.S.? I guess we don't. Instead of having a tech in general and then an extra, there's only 2 tests. And the first one is it's the basic test. It's 100 questions. Covers the normal stuff: electronics theory, rules and regs, safety stuff. Pretty similar. If you've passed the general in the U.S., you have a pretty good chance, with the exception of a few different rules and regs. You have a pretty good chance of just being able to pass a Canadian test out of the box. The difference is a passing grade is a 70, and that's for a basic license, which is kind of like a technician with a little bit more. It's a little bit of HF. And then if you get an 80% or better, it's basic with honors, which is kind of an advanced class equivalency that we don't have anymore in the U.S., but it's more than a general, but it's not quite a full extra. So, and then there's an advanced class or an advanced test. That's a different test. So there's kind of 3 levels, but there's only 2 tests. And the first one, it depends on how you score. I used to think the extra test was, I'm still a general in the U.S., and when I passed the general, they actually offered to let me take the extra, and I was like, oh no, 50 questions, no, I don't have the patience for that. And of course, I show up to Canada, like, yeah, it's 100 questions. So, yeah, it's very similar. And this volunteer examiners, same deal. I will say though that I took the test. It was inputted within 20 or 30 minutes. And within the hour, I knew my call sign. And the next day, I was able to use my call sign. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. I'm not sure that's just because the filing methods or I got lucky. But it's a very similar experience.
So we'll get back into hemorrhage in a second, but you mentioned you're back in the States. So I guess I presumed that you lived in Canada now, but do you split residency between the U.S. and Canada?
No, I'm officially full-time in Canada, and I'm just here traveling because there was more winter coming, and I said, "Phooey on you." And my wife's like, "I can't handle any more snow, so let's just go somewhere." We were originally supposed to go to Florida on this trip, but I found out that my best friend is getting leave. He's in the Army. He's getting leave from Germany. He's going to be at his home in Louisiana in a couple of months, and we always try to meet up when he's back in the States. So my wife and I decided, instead of doing Florida now and then doing Louisiana, which is practically next door when you're talking about going from Toronto area, it didn't make sense to do that drive twice in the span of like 4 months. So we decided just to come down here to Virginia and tootle around, and we have a thing planned, which we'll get into probably further in this discussion, but we have a thing planned in Delaware that was a very specific date. So yeah, we're just, I was at one state park last week and got, it was a twofer, and I managed to get a kilo while I was there. And I'm here at another state park in Virginia, and I don't know if I'll get I'm only here a couple more nights. I may or may not get a kilo here as well, but I'm just in the evenings after work, I just pound out the contacts and do what I can do. And, it's a lot of fun. And, we're out in the country. We got our dogs, and it's kind of the simple life. It's a little more relaxing than at home with the grandkids.
So specifically, which park are you at right now?
This is Kilo 1312, which is Pocahontas State Park. It's just outside of Richmond, Virginia.
And you're set up currently. I think you told me before we started, you have your rig setting next to you, and
Yep.
I presume the antenna's in the air.
It's right here. I know it's out of frame, but I'm patting my Yaesu, and yeah, I got a 128-foot end fed up in the trees.
Nice. So I'm actually keeping you away from getting that kilo. I apologize.
Oh no, I took a late lunch break from my day job for this, so I wouldn't be on the radio anyways. At least not officially.
Well, it sounds like a fun trip that you're able to work as well as go to these parks and activate all the way down to Louisiana. So tell me about Delaware. What's happening in Delaware?
A few of us are getting together in Delaware, and over the course of 3 days, we are going to activate every park in Delaware. And that group is the Three Amigos, which is myself, Victor Echo 3 Tango Hotel Radio Tom, Victor Echo 3 X-Ray November Sierra Brian, so 3 guys from Ontario, and then James, Kilo Echo 8 Papa Zulu November, who a lot of people know, the ham radio adventure guy. He'll be meeting us over there, and currently the plan is that Tom, who you've had on recently, Whiskey 8 Tango Alpha Mike, and his wife Julie, Whiskey Tango 8 Juliet, they're hoping to come over and meet us, and the 6 of us are going to activate all the parks over the course of 3 days.
Sounds like a great plan. How many parks is that?
It's 43 parks in Delaware. There are a couple of twofers, so it's only 40 or 41 stops, not including one that we're actually camping at. But we're also, for the benefit of James, who needs New Jersey, and my buddies from Ontario who haven't activated any U.S. states, we're going to hop across the bridge and get one park in New Jersey, and then we're going to get a twofer in Pennsylvania that's like 5 minutes from a park in Delaware. And then again, we're getting one in Maryland that's just a couple minutes from a park in Delaware. So we're actually going to throw a couple of bonus parks in there. And then on Saturday afternoon, we've arranged the schedule so that probably around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we're going to be showing up at Lummis Pond, which is central northern Delaware, very accessible for a lot of people, huge park. We're going to show up there, and we're just going to spend the rest of the afternoon there with whoever wants to show up and do kind of an impromptu meetup. I'm not sure who's going to come, but yeah, weather, we're going to do our thing regardless of weather. So, I guess that might, I've done robes in the snow, ice storms, rain, windstorms. As long as I can, it's not lightning or something that's, dangerous, I'm going to play radio, right? So we'll see who shows up and what the weather's like.
So, James, how are you structuring that? Are you all moving en masse to each park altogether, or have you separated out and, kind of divide and conquer, or a little bit of both?
Well, we're actually, there's a meeting pending to discuss a couple details, but in general, there's 4 of us, myself, the 2 Canadians, and James PZN. We're going to be in my truck, and we're just going to be passing the mic. We do that a lot. The 3 Amigos, V3THR, V3XNS, and myself, we do that a lot. So adding a 4th is not really hard for us there. Tom and Julie tend to do a lot of digital. So they might be following on and being like right behind us, one part behind. Or we, some places we might all pass the mic. We're still figuring that logistic part out, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting exercise having 6 operators.
Well, this is definitely going to give me an incentive to get my Kenwood hooked back up to a wire. I took the antennas down for a construction project that I hope to do this year, and haven't quite got everything back together again. So I'll try to get that done. What's the date again that you're going to be out there?
It's a weekend, so it's April 7, 8, and 9.
Okay, so I'm out. I'm going to be visiting my son up in Burlington, so I guess I'll miss all that fun. But that was a great idea. I'm really happy for you guys.
I'll be in Killen's Pond, which is our base camp for. I'll be there starting Sunday night, a week and a half from now, the Sunday before Easter. So I'll be, if anybody needs just a park in Delaware to get work Delaware, I'll be there for 3 or 4 nights before the robe. So it won't be all lost for people who are busy on Easter. Easter worked out for us. Brian does umpiring, so for sports teams. So the season starts up in May. I get a long weekend already with work. It worked out in James's schedule, so it was, even though we know a lot of people are doing things at Easter with family and stuff, it was kind of just the weekend that worked the best.
So James, obviously you're a very active activator. I know you do some hunting also. All of this Parks on the Experience must be invaluable when you're working on the development team because you're actually out there experiencing the system.
Yeah, it definitely helps. I often will bring very edge case bugs to the team. There's been a few. Like I think I was probably the first high volume QSO person to really look at how the park departments weren't working with the call sign with a suffix or a prefix. We haven't fixed that perfectly yet either, but it's complicated. But yeah, it helps, and all of us that work on the dev team, we're all activators and hunters. Some more than others, but it definitely helps with our perspective because we're not adding a bunch of stuff that isn't useful. But yeah, we rely on everybody, activators and hunters. We get a lot of comments and feedback, and we rely on everybody's feedback when we're looking at new features or bugs or improvements. But yeah, like one of the reasons I joined the team is because I thought the map needed some improvements, and we're still working on getting a map version 2. It's an ongoing project, but we've had a lot of great feedback from the prototype that we shared around, and that's really good because that means that when we start putting it out there to use, people are going to be receptive to it and help us build it into something stable and useful, and won't just be something that gets ignored, right? So yeah, being a heavy activator and a hunter probably helps, but a lot of it is just having that experience and being able to understand other people's experiences when they're giving us feedback as well.
So I have seen the map prototype, and it's really exciting. Could you describe it on air a little bit for us, for those that haven't seen it?
Yeah, so it's a map first off, but we're adding layers so that you can see not just the the parks rendered on the map with their general locations, but also being able to do things like color code them to whether you hunted them or activated them or both. And also we plan to have a map for active spots, which sometimes when oh, hey, propagation seems to be going all east for me, you can see who's spotted out east, and you can look at that and say, oh, somebody spotted in Virginia, I might be able to get them. But having a visual is kind of nice, and also it's a nice eye candy when you look, you see, oh, there's 8 people active in Europe. It's kind of cool to see that, and so that's a couple of the basic things. But there's a lot of other. Once we have the base map in, and we have the ability to have layers, kind of the sky's the limit as far as what we could potentially put on the map. There's been a lot of requests for having park outlines and stuff rendered, and that's not going to happen because it's just too much data, and we don't have the manpower to be stewards of that kind of data. So, but we want to make it as smooth as possible for people to look at the POTA map and then look at the official parks maps and be able to cross-reference easily. So we're taking into account, being able to make your own spreadsheets. A lot of people do, and they have various ways of doing those. But we because we can't take on having all the data, we're also trying to make it as a connecting point where you can extract some data from the map, and make your own secondary or more detailed list for your own reason. One of the features I'm hoping to put in is kind of a road planner, basically be able to go to an area and say, if I'm starting here, draw a circle that's, say an hour, uh, and what parks can I do? And then, okay, let me just start clicking on them in an order I think makes sense. And then, export that to Google Maps to do directions or something, right? Because that's a feature, like you're saying, that's a feature that I originally built that map for myself for that purpose, and then realized, hey, there's got to be other people who love to use the map for building roads, and I think that interest has really grown since the new Robe Awards were released. I guess about 6 months ago, where you don't have to actually go in and put them in manually as radars, but they're automatic. And I see a lot more people, and a lot more people talk to me about doing robes. And so I think a couple little functions in the map to help people see the possible robes for them. It's just going to be more tools for people to use and get out there and have fun. That's what it all comes down to. Everything we add to the site is to enable our activators and our hunters to have more fun.
Well, I love all that, and I can relate to most of it. I actually created my own Google map to track all the maps or all the parks in Maine. So I have them color coded, the ones I've gone to, the ones that have never been activated by anybody before, and then the others that are targets. And I can also understand the Rove because I'm at a point now where all the parks that I haven't activated in Maine are beyond a 90-mile radius. So in order to be efficient, I really need to do several at a time. So the last Rove I did was Mid-Coast Maine. I hit about 13 parks, but I was doing this all manually, trying to figure out, efficiently which one should I go to first and second and third and fourth, and came up with some very impressive looking spreadsheets in order to make that all happen. So I'll be excited to see what you produce for me. That will make it easier because that really is my future in Maine. More multi-park roves over a period of 2 or 3 days.
And I'm at the same thing where, I have to drive 2 hours to get to a new to me park in Ontario at this point, which means that if I'm going there and I'm using that time and that gas, I want to hit as many parks in the area as I can. So yeah, it's that's a lot of it. But did you say you have atnos in Maine?
We have
that still haven't been activated?
Yeah, quite a few of them actually.
Oh, okay. Well, so I've activated like 28 states, and I've missed Maine, so I might have to come and fix some of those atnos.
Well, let me know so I can get there before you. I'm just kidding. I will tell you this.
Yeah.
The very first activation I ever did was Quaddy Head. I mentioned it earlier. And when I made the plan, it had never been activated. And I thought, this is a gift because it's a beautiful spot. I'd been there before, furthest, most eastern spot in Maine, on the coast. No one had ever been there. And of course, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks prior, someone from Bar Harbor activated it. So, and then the same thing happened to Aroostook County. I'm from Aroostook County, which is the northernmost county in Maine. And I was hoping to go up there and do a rove and get the first time activation. And someone from out of the state went up and hit them all. But I would welcome you here. If you do make it to Maine, please let me know. I'd love to join you at one of those activations.
It's tentatively on the schedule for the fall. We might not get that trip in this year, but one of my missions is to eventually activate every state and every province. There's people that have done either, but so far nobody's done both. So we'll see. There's a couple people that could probably beat me there to get activated all states and activate all provinces. So we'll see. My wife and I, we've wanted to go to Hawaii and Alaska for as long as we've known each other. So kind of like, oh, well, hey, there's another reason to go.
So James, I'm switching gears for a second. Tell me about the Plaque event and your feelings about it, whether or not you'll participate in it, and if you are participating, what that will look like.
So in general, I'm sure Tom probably told you some of this. It was felt that the Plaque event needed to be separated from the Support Your Parks weekend because the Plaque event was becoming more, for lack of a better term, contesty, and we need to keep that in mind as how it affects the other amateurs around the world and respective bands and whatnot. Uh, so I think that's great, and to separate it out, um, it leaves the support your parks for. To me, I like them as the social occasions, um, to have get-togethers and introduce more people to activating and POTA in general. So I think it's grand that there's less. Uh, um, I won't call it pressure, but it takes all that other stuff out of the support your parks weekend in the summer. Um, so the separation I think is great. Um, Naturally, based on where I live, I'm not super happy with a couple of the rule changes, but I get where they make sense as a whole. To be fair to other people who don't have, 150-mile long set of threefers. Um, you know, Most people know that last year I did a 68 park rove on the Plaque weekend and won the rove category. Um, and only some of the obviously the Enfers didn't count towards that. I got credit for 65 stops. Um, so for roves, under the old rules, the Enfers wouldn't have mattered, but under the new rules for roving, Enfers count. So it was kind of a question as how that would work out. So the decision was made by that committee to basically flatten the playing field, and it's one park at a time. So um, that's pretty much the only thing that I wish hadn't happened, but I get it. Um, so other than that, I think it's going to be a good event, um, and I'm still discussing with my local club on whether we're going to do something club wise, or if I'm going to go and do something crazy myself again. I kind of set a precedent in my first one, and I did something crazy. So now I feel like I have to up the ante and do something slightly crazier. Um, whether that's 70 park rove or.
Right. I was going to ask that question. So, super crazy would be more a larger rove.
And to be honest, a 70 park isn't. I took my time. I went home and slept for 6 hours on the weekend. Like, I didn't push myself to do the 65. So, if we want to be crazy, it's potentially possible to do a 90 park rove in 48 hours. That would be edging on a little crazy. But, like, I already won the rove, and, I'd really I like seeing other people doing roves, whatever size, right? It doesn't have to be craziness. But, I love when other people are doing roves. And as a developer, I'm lucky I get to see some of the stats in the back end. And, I see every time somebody gets a warthog or a rhino, and then I really look and go, oh, there's people getting cheetahs and, and doing the bigger roves. And that makes me happy because I like seeing other people enjoying that aspect of the multi-park rove. So I'm just hoping other people step up and one up me. And I did 65, and I know it's possible for some people to do, 68, 70. So I'd be really happy to see somebody do that. So I had planned to go for a different plaque in a different category. And I'm going to mention here that I'm very lucky in that because I live in Canada, I don't have to compete against my American ham friends. So, because like these guys can wallop me when it comes to QSOs and activations, like Bill and Carrie and Ray and James PZN. They are just incredible activators. And that would be almost impossible to go up against them. And Justin, I can't remember his call sign. But we have a good core of activators in the U.S. So I'm lucky that I'm in kind of the wastelands of Canada still, and we're still growing. So it's to me, it's a fun competition. And I just want to do every aspect of POTA, whether it's activate as many parks or get as many QSOs as I can, or, do the club thing and get as many QSOs for the club. So we're not sure. There's because the weekend it falls on, there's some conflicting schedules for some of our club members, so we may or may not do a club thing for the Plaque. So, I guess I'm gonna tell everybody wait and see. Maybe the 100 Park Road comes, maybe it doesn't.
Well, I, for one, are going to be looking forward to seeing what you do. I asked this question to a lot of people, not only on air, but I'm very curious after all the conversation and even some of the controversy about the Plaque event. I'm just very curious how people are going to actually execute it themselves. And I'm hearing a lot of different things, and I'm hearing a lot of people actually say what you just said, that they're still trying to figure it out. I've talked to people that have significant club activity going on, like significant, which is really impressive. And then others that, they intend to get a camping site and operate as much of the 48 hours as possible on multiple bands, which is, I think, also a kind of a cool approach. So I'll look forward to hearing you wherever you are. And I do intend to be out there. I don't know how long myself. I don't know if I'll be able to do a full weekend, but I'm definitely going to participate at some level.
Definitely blessed in that. My wife is very understanding of the hobby, and she knows I'm just slightly competitive by nature. So, I packed a cooler with sandwich stuff and take some waters and Gatorade, and and she knows I'll call and check in with her, and I may come home to sleep depending on how the road is going, and I may not. Right. So, unfortunately, she. Even going back to when I was living there part-time before, she's always wanting to take me to places. She grew up in Ontario, so she knew all these places that were cool. And she wanted to take me, and I don't mind camping, and I don't mind the outdoors, but I'm a computer geek, right? Why would I go camp for a week? What am I going to do for a week? Well, now I have something to do, and I can still step out and, make some steaks on the fire and enjoy being in a park like I am now. Something relaxing about watching the squirrels play while you're on a conference call at work. You can't beat it. Knowing that, you can walk the 2.5 steps to your radio after work and start banging out contacts, right? It's pretty relaxing that. So I kind of try to bring that energy to the Support Your Parks and the Plaque event. And if it gets to the point where I'm aggravated or getting stressed about it and it's not as much fun, then I back off and say it's a hobby. I want to do these cool things, but maybe it's not going to work out. So we'll see what happens.
James, I think that's a great sentiment to end the conversation on. It is a hobby. It's a lot of fun. You're clearly having a lot of fun at it. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me today.
Appreciate you asking me to come, and I enjoy watching your other interviews. Some great commentary on different aspects of the hobby, and it's nice clips for other aspects, because I'm very much into POTA, and I like building antennas and wiring up my truck and doing these things, but I'm not a contester. I'm not into RIDI or or slow scan TV or some of those, I'll call them edge aspects, but, some of those other sides of the hobby. So hearing about people who are, keeps the awareness, and occasionally something will pop up in your interviews. It's like, oh, I wasn't really paying attention to that angle, so it's lots of fun.
Well, I hope there's going to be more of that in the future. I mean, obviously I'm still learning or relearning the hobby myself. So all these conversations are a learning experience for me. And as I want to learn some new topic, then I ask that person to join me here. And you've been super helpful in making me understand even more the inner workings of Parks in the Air, and I really appreciate it. I've been talking to James Linden, VE3JLN, also N6NRD. You'll hear him on the Parks in the Air. Well, you see him on the Parks in the Air spotting page. You'll also hear him, it sounds like, over the Easter weekend as they activate all of the parks in Delaware. That's really exciting. Thank you, James.
Thank you for having me.